Welcome to this episode of Eureka. We are going to have a very informative conversation with Dr. Rakesh Garg. He is from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and this episode we are going to talk about what do we do suppose if you see somebody collapsing on the side of road, maybe most likely heart attack. Can we just sit there, stand there, watch them? For every minute that we are wasting not doing anything, we are reducing their chance of survival by 10%. We are going to discuss this, but before that, let's take a look at his brief profile. Keep watching Eureka, we'll continue this conversation.
Dr. Rakesh Garg is an anesthesiologist, intensivist and pain physician. He is Associate Professor at Department of Anesthesiology, Intensive Care, Pain and Palliative Care from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. He obtained his MBBS from University College of Medical Sciences and GTB Hospital, New Delhi. And after that, he received his MD in Anesthesiology from New Delhi's Maulana Azad Medical College. Dr. Rakesh Garg's areas of research are onco-anesthesiology, acute and chronic pain, airway, resuscitation, research. He innovated certain tools and techniques required for perioperative anesthesia utility, like modified intensive spirometry assembly for providing intensive spirometry for patient and tracheostomy, among others. Dr. Rakesh Garg is also a key author and core committee member for formulation of the first Indian cardiopulmonary resuscitation guidelines under the aegis of Indian Resuscitation Council, Indian Council of Anesthesiologists. He has been felicitated with many awards and honors. Noted among them are ISA Bhopal Award 2018 for Academic Excellence conferred by the Indian Society of Anesthesiologists and also awarded at Global Healthcare Summit 2017 Kolkata by American Association of Physicians of Indian origin for contributing for exemplary work for drafting the first Indian CPR guidelines.
So, thank you for being with us in the show. I mean, it's a very wonderful opportunity. So, let me start with this question. I mean, many of us are baffled. Why people are talking so much about heart attack? For example, when I was young, when I was finishing my school or I was entering into my college, sure, there was a heart problem. There were people who were dying of a heart attack. One heard about them. But usually it's said that it's a rich man's disease, so it's not something that's widely prevalent. Is it because of some lopsidedness in our medical thinking that we are talking a lot about heart attack and not talking actually about diseases which are afflicting large number of people?
You are very right. If you talk of the decades back, it was actually a disease of elderly, the disease of rich person. But if we see the lifestyle changes that actually is happening nowadays, whether it's a urban area or rural area, everybody is having a good amount of stress. This is one. Second thing is our food modifications. We are shifting a little more towards the junk foods, the outside foods, and these lifestyle modifications has taken a huge burden on the human body.
Okay.
And that is the reason that if you see even a farmer, even a 30-year-old boy will have a heart attack. So, that shift is a huge medical concern, that it's no more a disease of 70, 80 years, it's no more a disease of rich person. Every person who is having any lifestyle modification, any stress factor is a risk factor for getting an MI. So, each person is now having some risks for having a heart attack. The other
Yeah, please.
The other important aspect is when we say heart attack, the unfortunate aspect is if it happens in the hospital, we are able to do something for the patient because we have everything inside the hospital. But 90% of the heart attack will happen at home.
Oh, that's where the major issue comes in.
Absolutely.
But before we go there, I mean, let me also understand this heart attack. I mean, usually people say that if you are obese, then your chances of heart attack is more. But we also find people who are lean, perhaps looking healthy, get a heart attack. So, how does this heart attack actually occur?
Right.
What is actually happening there?
I think this is a very important point. If you see some of the videos recently from the India, the athletes, the players will get a heart attack in the ground. So, they are the absolutely fit person, they do not have any issues. So, this means it is just not the obesity, this means there are some other issues also, and the other issues are the stress factor, the lifestyle modification, the food habits, the family history. Right, and we say if the family history is positive for heart attack, subsequent generations will have more chances of heart attack, and the chances of age at which it happens will be a little lower.
Okay.
So, more strong the family history, grandparents on both the sides, the chances of having grandchildren having heart attack at lower age will be much higher, because the risk factors are much more. So, we have to target those population.
What actually happens during a heart attack? I mean,
so, what actually leads is, when we say heart attack, there are a couple of things that happens. One is our heart is being supplied by small coronaries, small blood vessels which give blood to the heart itself. The heart gives blood to the body, but somebody has to give blood to the heart also to
so
function.
it's something like, for example, a fuel tanker.
Absolutely.
When it has to run, it also should have a fuel tank to run the.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So, any risk factors that I just mentioned, if they compromise the blood supply to the heart, that causes the heart attack.
Okay.
Even a stress, right, like for example, the younger generations now, they want to study, they want to settle down early, they are working 12 hours, 15 hours in the odd hours, that is the stress factor. They want to go to a higher post, that is a stress factor. They skip their meals, that is a stress factor. The sedentary lifestyle. Now, we are very fond of using technology, sitting in single place doing everything. Sedentary lifestyle, again a risk factor. So, those coronaries are blocked by some type of lipid, some type of something called bad cholesterol, and that leads to the compromised circulation. So, any small stress, any small event will lead to total blockage.
Okay.
And total blockage is what is called heart attack.
So, it is basically a heart attack is related to blockage within the bloodstream within the heart, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, suppose if your other blood vessels are kind of partly blocked or something, that won't necessarily lead to heart attack.
But both are interrelated. So, if something is happening in the other blood vessels, probably the same thing will be happening in the heart also. Okay. So, they are interrelated, but yes, heart is the main organ. So, if something happens to it, the chances of compromise leading to heart attack, leading to cardiac arrest will be much higher.
Okay. So, suppose if I see somebody collapsing right before my eyes, I mean, most likely if it is a heart attack, they will be kind of placing their hand on the chest because they would have felt a huge pain. So, that is a kind of an indicator that it is a collapse because of heart attack?
Absolutely.
Maybe because collapse can also occur because of other reasons, right?
Absolutely. So, if somebody is, let's say somebody is talking to you or somebody is walking, and if he suddenly collapses, most common reason in the adult will be the heart attack. So, no confusion about it. So, what actually will happen is, I said that the blood will not go to the heart, right, which is supplying, coronaries will not supply. So, the heart needs some energy. When heart is not getting the energy, the heart rhythm will change. And heart appropriate rhythm is required for the appropriate blood flow to the other organs like brain, like kidney and other organs. So, that will stop, right. Now, the heart automaticity is not functioning. It automatically functions at 70 to 80 times per minute. Now, because of this heart attack, it is not functioning. So, what option do we have? Automatically it is not functioning. Can we do something from outside? That is what is called CPR. That is what is called cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So, if we compress the heart from outside, which it was earlier doing it automatically, that also will serve the same purpose.
You said CPR. Can you explain?
Yeah, this is cardiopulmonary resuscitation.
So, what does that three word mean?
So, this means when we talk in the medical term, we want to give artificial supply of the blood and the oxygen to the patient. So, it's cardio means heart, pulmonary means some type of oxygen. Resuscitation is we giving them manually something, so that though the heart is not able to pump itself, but externally we are doing something for the heart, so that the transient till the doctors can do something, we are doing manual compression, so that the blood can be going to the vital organs, which is essential for all the patients.
Very interesting, but here I am going to ask you, maybe perhaps in a television show in this kind of fashion, maybe you may not be able to describe completely, but in a very simple manner, how do you actually do CPR?
Right. I think this is important across everybody. People used to say that this is a medical procedure, should be done by doctors, should be done by nurses, but now we believe, and across the world believe, that each one of us should be expert in doing the things. Obviously, the steps will be different for layperson, for doctors, but then everybody should know it. The process is very simple. Now, I said the heart is not functioning, so we need to compress it. So, can we do it compress externally? Yes, absolutely. We know the heart sits somewhere on the just below the ribs. So, if we compress externally, the compression force will go to the heart, and manually we are going to increase the cardiac output.
So, general popular belief is that heart is on your left hand side.
Okay.
I mean, what do you say?
So, it is not exactly on the left side, it is partly behind the sternum, and some part is on the left side of the body, right. So, when we say, if you remember, if you want to compress a balloon, let us take example of a balloon, right. If I want to compress the balloon, it has to be between two hard surfaces.
Yeah.
If I keep on a blanket, if I keep on a water and I want to press it, it will not be pressed, right. So, same purpose is for the heart. It's not pumping, so I want to compress it. So, I have to keep something between two heart structures, right. So, the most heart structure is in the center.
In center.
Right. So, this is sternum, breastbone that we say, and the other heart structure is in the back, the spine, the vertebral column, the backbone.
Okay.
So, these two are the heart structures. If I press between two heart structures, the heart will compress and will pump out the blood.
So, instead of pressing on the left or right, you actually do it on the center.
Absolutely on the center.
So that the rib cages and your spine acts as two places.
Yes, exactly.
And also this also means that when you are putting them on the ground, it's better to put them on a hard surface, right?
Absolutely, very good point. Patient need not to be on a very soft soft mattress or something. It has to be on a hard surface, and the best place is you keep them on the ground. If you see outside the hospital, majority of will collapse doing something, so they will collapse usually on the floor.
Yeah.
So just keep them on the floor. Start this process on the floor itself. It's easily doable, and in fact, it's more comfortable if you are doing on the floor because you do a good amount of effective chest compression. Chest compression, I mean the compressing the heart manually.
So, question is that why one should do it on the roadside? Suppose actually if I can hail a taxi or auto or some vehicle and rush the patient to hospital, will it not be better so that a really good medically trained person can take care rather than some kind of a amateurish attempt?
It's a very important question because I think it's a question for many of us that why not to take it to the hospital where experts will do it. But I say that everybody of us are the experts. The level of expertise is different, and as we said in the beginning, with each minute that passes by, the success of revival without CPR decreases by 10%.
Okay.
And if you see the Indian scenario,
so which means that if I delay by 5 minutes,
most probably
50%
chances are gone.
Okay.
And if you delay by say 10-15 minutes, at least some hypoxic injury will happen to brain. So, you must have heard the term something like a brain death. So, if it doesn't get a blood supply for 10-15 minutes, even if the doctors do something, he will be vegetative state. So, we don't want those type of situation happening. So, the initial 3 to 4 minutes are the golden period for a patient with cardiac arrest. And if you see the Indian infrastructure, traffic and the medical services, I assume that it will take at least 10, 15, 20 minutes to reach the nearest hospital. So, that 10-20 minutes is very crucial for us, wherein we want that each layperson should do something to the patient so that patient is reached to a hospital in such a state that doctors can save him.
So, it's something like a first aid. I mean, suppose if you have a cut, you don't rush to hospital immediately. First, you try to bandage or put the bleeding stop before you rush to hospital.
You have put in a right blanket term for it. So I will put it it's something called a first aid for a lay person.
Very nice.
So simple.
Very nice. We will take a very short break. Keep watching Eureka. I'm going to ask this question. I'm also curious. Is this prevalent in Western countries? If they are not so much prevalent in Western countries, why in India? And many other points related to this. Keep watching Eureka. We are going to have a very interesting conversation. We'll take a very short break.
हर वो आर्थिक फैसला या नीति जो तय करता है विकास की गति, कैसे और क्यों लिए जाते हैं फैसले, क्या होता है इनका हम पर असर। देखिए अर्थनीति शनिवार शाम 7:30 बजे सिर्फ राज्यसभा टीवी पर।
Welcome back to Eureka. We are having a very wonderful conversation with Dr. Rakesh Garg. He is from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and we are talking about CPR and other action that we can do to save people who are in distress, heart attack and other diseases. We are talking about heart attack. We are talking about CPR. We talk about very much in countries like India, but What about Western countries? For example, in Europe, you don't see this very often being talked in, I mean, at least not in the same, stride as we do it in India.
I agree.
They don't need it.
They definitely need it, but only thing is they have started all this process a little earlier. So, they are well settled with the provision of first aid in the field. So, if you see the infrastructure, they will have ambulances at certain interval of highways, they will have AEDs, something called, जिसको हम हिंदी में बोलते हैं झटका देने वाली machine. So, AEDs will be there at places. People are trained for it, right? They have some training programs in the school. So, if anything happens, they are able to take care. And the other thing is the option of the ambulances or the air medical services are shared better there. So, people will get medical help within say 1 to 2 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, and I said it's a golden time. So, if they get this help, probably the survival is good. That's why the system is already in situ. That's why they are able to take care of these patients. But when we are just making guidelines for India, we realize that they are also working hard to maintain that level of expertise and training to all the people, medicos, so that same type of medical services are provided to them. So, they are working on it, but the system is in situ. But now, if you see, the positive point is that people are getting more aware, they are learning the process, they are asking to learn the things. We have been conducting such programs for last 3 years now, and a huge number of population has been trained, and once we train them, they spread the news and the people demand to be trained more. So, that is a huge awareness which is going into India, and that is a positive input. If people demand something, it has to be fulfilled.
Yeah, like you said, for example, in many of the Indian cities, not only cities, towns, or even perhaps in many villages, to reach to your house from the highway, main road itself will take about 10-15 minutes because it's narrow, congested, so many things are there. So, even if the ambulance has to come, it's not going to be that easy, right?
So, somebody has to bridge that gap from a medical services to a patient who got in cardiac arrest, and the best gap is a common man. So, we should not be underestimating their awareness, their strength of doing the things, but we will need to make them empowered to do the things, and it has to be done scientifically.
And you have been given various awards for promoting this CPR in India. So, why? What was your major point in that?
The reason was, if you talk of in India, there have been many celebrities who was not given timely services, and they suffers, and common man always suffers. You see in the media a lot of things that are happening. People want to learn, that is no confusion about it. Younger generation is much more want to do something for the society. So, if you can just empower them, that becomes a useful tool. But who will empower them? Who will train them? Somebody has to take an initiative. Till now, we are using the international guidelines which has been formed by America, Europe, but as we just discussed, those are not suitable for us. Yeah. Our infrastructure is different, our geographical distribution is different, our culture is different. So, we have to have something for Indian scenario, and this is where our group from Indian Society of Anesthesiologists took a lead for the first time in India across all the medical fraternity to make a guideline which is not only for medicos, but also for the layperson.
Okay.
And probably this is the first in the world wherein a CPR guideline exclusively for laymen has been formed in India.
Oh,
it is well appreciated across the world, and that is why all those awards.
Suppose one of our viewer who is watching this wants to learn this, what should he or she do?
Best thing is they can approach, there are a lot of people around this India who are training it. So, they should be aware that where it is going on, and they can approach them. This is something called layperson CPR, and wherever the training programs are happening, they can be done. And just for our viewers, we will be using a mega camp on 16th of October 2019, which is our World Restart a Heart Day across the world. So, probably on that day across India, last year we trained almost 2.5 lakh people in a single day. This time we are targeting 5 lakh people. So, I think I can ask viewers to take advantage of that particular day and get trained, and it will be at various places. They will get advertisements on various platforms, they can participate, but do not wait for that day. I will say viewers, you can ask for it and it will be organized.
So, if you say that somebody who is trained, I mean as a lay person in giving first aid, a CPR first aid, how many people should be there in locality, or how do you see that? I mean, suppose if there is an office, right, how many people you would look for?
So, if you see the final endpoint, the best, if the ideal way, I will like one person in each family.
Okay, one
So
person in
each family, because there's a one person, anything happen in the family, he will take. That's the end point. But right now it will take a long time because we are working on different platforms. But I will say that if there's an office of 100 people, at least couple of people may be trained there, and they should be able to manage it. And they should have some infrastructure like the availability of AEDs, availability of training programs there. And in fact, government is also supporting these events. So gradually we'll reach that stage. Maybe if we can train somewhere 20 crores to 30 crores people in India, I think that's the best medical common man involvement in the system. It will take some time.
Suppose if I'm a person who is trained in CPR, I mean, and I see somebody collapsing, and let's say I'm in a place like, let's say, a mall or some such place, I would need some machine, right? I mean, the AEDs. But I won't be carrying it always, right? So, do we need some kind of a mandatory systems established so that we can actually provide the services really?
I think this is absolutely a very important question, because everybody thinks that you need a lot of equipments and gadgets to do CPR. But we have designed the layperson CPR in such a way that you don't require anything. You just require a dedicated common man who had learned the technique to do it in an efficient way. So, it's just you trained, and you can do good CPR. And subsequently, obviously, as I said initially, that majority of time the cardiac arrest happen because of the change in the rhythm, the activity. So, there is something called AEDs, automated external defibrillator. If we apply it, the rhythm changes to a normal rhythm. So, that needs to be applied at the earlier. Government has already taken an initiative to put these AEDs at different places. All the malls, all the cinema halls already do have it. So, we need to train the people how to use them, and they are easily available. But even if they are not available, or there is something they have been called for and it is being arrived, you just start manual chest compression, and it will save patient's life to the extent of 20 to 30%, even by doing these measures. By the time ambulance will arrive, they will take to the hospital, trained person will do it, and the survival chances will be much good. So, no equipment.
Very interesting, and I think this is a very important takeaway point. But what about other common emergencies?
Yeah, I do agree. There are a couple of other emergencies which also requires immediate care. For example, say if you talk of trauma, which is an emerging epidemic in India because of the industrialization, because of the technology, and we get a lot of road traffic accident. We are creating awareness. People are still not wearing seat belts. They are not wearing the helmets. We get a lot of trauma, and some of them are manageable if we provide them initial care, which is called as first aid. Like say, let me say an example. If you get a road traffic accident and bike accident, there will be a fracture femur, there could be a bleeding here. Obviously, the doctors will do a surgery, but that patient should reach alive to the hospital, and patient bleeds to death. Any trauma that happens here, they will just bleed.
So most of the death is actually because of the bleeding to death.
In trauma patients, especially the peripheral limb, they can be the injury to the head also. So there are certain injuries which are not, we cannot say that they will survive. For example, say if somebody has a cut throat and everything happens, goes away, or a spine injuries at the upper level. But some injuries like fracture femur, like something in the abdomen, something in the liver, where the patient is bleeding, they reach hospital after some time, say half an hour, they will bleed to death. So, can we do something for them? Yes, we can do. So, and who can do it? It's a layperson again. I will come to the layperson again. They are the first most important ambassador for us as doctors. If they can do something, we can also add to it to make the patient survive. The simple measures, like if somebody is bleeding profusely from here, it will hardly take 10 minutes for him to bleed to death. But what we can do is just put our hanky here, press it tightly for say 5 to 10 minutes, it will stop. And that is a simple measure that we can do for these patients. Similarly, if you go to the areas like which are near rivers, ocean, the people drown, the people can have snake bites, dog bites, people can have stroke. So, those are the other emergencies which people should be aware of.
No, snake bite, one of the commonest belief is that wherever, I mean, suppose if it is in the lower limb, tie on your upper limb very tightly so that the poison will not enter into a bloodstream. That's a kind of a,
I think
to tie or not tie is a very important
There are many things which we have been following traditionally or conventionally from so many years. Some of the myths may be right, I do not criticize them, but from the medical science of point of view, they may not be appropriate, right. If I just explain you, because the common thing is people will just put a long incision on the site of a snake bite and they will apply a tourniquet and think that the poison will not go into the body system. But actually this not happen. because our heart, as mentioned initially, it pumps around 70 to 80 times.
Okay.
Right? This means one circulation is every 1 second. In 10 seconds, there is something called anything which I inject here, it will go to the brain. So, can we tie a tourniquet within 10 seconds?
Yeah.
It's not possible. So, this means by the time people think of tying a tourniquet, the poison has already gone to the whole body. So, the aim here is to shift the patient safely to the hospital, so that they can start the treatment rather than doing the things which can harm. For example, if I tie a tourniquet tightly here, and if a patient reaches a hospital half an hour or somebody missed that tourniquet, this whole limb will be gone away. So, we are losing a limb and it is not giving us any advantage. So, there are certain things. Similarly, if you talk of burns patient, a common thing, people will apply some toothpaste over it, and they say that it will be helping it. And common myth, even I remember in my childhood, if some burn happen, we'll apply the ice cold cube directly over this, over the burnt area, but actually it will harm. So, we teach, we have a couple of courses which has been started by government, which is also an initiative of WHO, in which we teach them the basic do's and don'ts for these common emergencies, and so that our laymen can get benefit. We can save them from many of the casualties that happen, and they can reach the hospital safely.
Yeah. So, another area that I want to ask you, where you are very much very deeply involved, is palliative care. Particularly, we all prefer to live a good life, but there are occasions when things are beyond our control, and we know very clearly the end is nearing, because let us say, for example, if you are in the advanced stage of cancer, that time the quality of life and the quality of death is really bad. So, what do you do for that?
This, I think, are very sensitive issues that you have created, and it will be very useful to our viewers. When we talk of the advanced cancer, now we are always talking of something called good life, comfortable life, but if you ask anybody in the members, they must have seen the death of some of the relatives or some family members. The good death is equally important, not only for the patient, but also for those family members who are seeing them. So, can we do something for them? The advanced cancer patients, unfortunately, they come too late to the hospital, the cancer has spread up. It causes a lot of issues, lot of symptoms. Patient will have huge pain, the fluid can accumulate in the lungs, they will have a lot of breathing problem, it can collect in the abdomen, it can go to the brain, it can go to the spine, and it will cause a lot of issues, vomiting, pain, distress, psychological distress. So, yes, definitely medical science is much advanced now, and we have so many things for them to be given to them, so that we can make their life comfortable. And this is something called supportive care. So, under the umbrella of supportive care, we provide them comfort care at each stage of life. Whatever time is left, they live happily, and they get a good death also, something called, we put in quotes, good death. So, this comes in the palliative care domain, supportive care domain, and the good aspect is people are getting aware. Even the government of India has put it into the health policy. The government is promoting it to the each states. Now, the medical colleges are having palliative care centers, so that our laymen, our public will get benefit from it. So, my message to the viewers will be, unfortunately, even if you have an advanced cancer, we have something to give to you. Now, the medical fraternity will not say ki your cancer is advanced, we cannot do for anything for you. No, this is not right. Even if it is advanced, even if we are not able to provide you cure, but we are definitely going to provide you a supportive care.
Very, very, I think it's an important point for noting it. Then let me shift to another question, I mean, related to cancer, of course. I mean, we don't want cancer to come.
Absolutely.
I mean, okay, yeah. So, what do I do?
I think this is the why cancer should happen,
Yeah.
if we can stop it. Why cardiac arrest should happen, we should stop it. This is the best thing, and this is something called preventive medicine. If you go across the world, the whole government paraphernalia or NGOs are working more in preventive, because that's more useful. Before we get a disease, if we can prevent it. So, I will very strongly support it that each one of us will not do anything which harms us, but will also prevent others to do it. Smoking myself is harming not only to me, but to the others also. So, we have to stop that aspect, stop smoking, stop alcohol, have a healthy lifestyle.
Very, very interesting point. I think this is where we need to stop. We will laugh together. I think that's a very, very important message from this conversation. For want of time, we will conclude this conversation here. Keep watching Eureka. We'll come back with another interesting conversation next week, same time.